An interesting thing when we go to a church and to worship in a congregation, the variety of ways that we hear the Bible. There's no doubt that Scripture is essential for the life of the church and the worship of God. But how Scripture functions, how it's used, is quite interesting. And across the centuries, there are many ways in which Scripture has been utilized in mediating the encounter that God has with His people. The obvious ones are reading. And we have to remember that in the early centuries of the church, it's possible that the majority of Christians were not literate. They could not read. And so for them, Scripture, which was at the heart of their life, the ways that they knew God through Jesus Christ, was extended to them and offered to them in ways that were accommodated to their capacity to understand. They heard it, they sung it, they heard it prayed, and they prayed it together. They heard it preached. As the church expanded and became more settled and church architecture came into being, they saw Scripture. They saw Scripture in stained glass. They saw it in carvings. They saw it in figures and statues. They saw it in icons. So they heard the Word. They saw the Word. They sang the Word. They prayed the Word. And then they enacted the Word through the liturgy itself by offering praise to God.
Jay and Linda Moorman own the Bovair-Rorden Studio, which is the oldest continually operating stained glass studio in the United States. They carry on a tradition that dates back to the 4th century, which is to use stained glass to help visualize the story of Scripture. As Linda Moorman explains,
back in earlier times when the peasants were in the country, they couldn't read, so when they came into town, it was a way to teach them their religion.
Even for today's widely literate church, stained glass as a decorative element still personally connects worshipers with the story of Scripture and with Christ. Linda Moorman recalls her childhood memories of attending a church with stained glass.
I know I've had to go to church every day before school, and I found myself sometimes, instead of paying attention to what it should have been, looking at the windows and wondering, what is that? Or just feeling inspired or relaxed, or maybe just being comfortable in the space I was in. A lot of times we do make windows that are people's calling card to say, this is our mission, this is what we want. A lot of the Good Shepherd, a very traditional window, or Christ knocking at the door, and it doesn't have a handle. Those are traditional calling cards to please come in and be part of our flock.
Old and New Testament stories frequently became the subject of stained glass, as in this rendering of the account in the book of Genesis of the high priest Melchizedek offering a blessing to Abraham. Examine the detail in the artist's rendering that tells the biblical story.